Hey YouTube, it's your boy Widgie here, coming out with some more strategy games with AoE 3DE, and today I'm going to be giving you a video of what to expect from your opponents per civilization. So this is going to give you a rough idea, especially for 1v1 and especially for beginner and intermediate players, and I'm going to blast through these really quickly and give you just an overall sort of majority of the time what that civ will do. Now when I say majority, I mean maybe 70-80% of the time of what they're going to do and what you can expect. And this will be super helpful for beginner players, because if you're a beginner and you're playing against beginners yourself, then they're most likely going to be going for either the most popular or the most stable sort of build order that they know, and the most common as well. So I'm hoping that this video will really help you out. And as I say, if you do find this video entertaining and useful, please feel free to drop a like, and also you can catch me streaming on Twitch at Widgie1. Let's do this. Okay, so the first are the British. Now, of course, if you don't know the Brits, when you build a manor house, you get a free settler. So what a lot of people will tend to go is the Virginia Company, or the VC boom, which means that they'll get a reduced wood cost per manor house, which means they can start booming really early and getting as many settlers as possible. So if you're playing against that situation, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you deny that as early as possible. And most of the time that comes in the form of a rush. So that's what I suggest you guys do. Try and rush, try and pressurize, try and raid with some cav potentially. Really try and slow down the eco of the Brits as much as you can, and it'll work out for you in the long term. So moving on to the Dutch. Now Dutch are very popular at the moment, very strong, and the majority of the time they will go for a semi-fast fortress. And a semi-fast fortress means that they will most likely create some cav halfway through between age 2 and age 3. Try and raid with those cav, and then off the back of that they will then age up into age 3. So what you need to make sure that you try and do, it's very difficult with Dutch, but you've got to try and rush them again. You've got to try and pressurize them, try and delay them and stop them getting into that age 3, and just be a real nuisance to them and try and raid them as best you can. They are extremely difficult to raid and to pressurize in age 2, but just try the best you can, and if that doesn't work, try and match them in age 3 and just try and fight it out. They are a very, very difficult civ, so if you do struggle with them, I completely understand, but that's all the advice I can give you guys. So without further ado, let's move on to the next civ. The French. So super versatile. Most players with the French will sort of go, once again, very similar to Dutch. They'll most likely open up into cav and they'll raid you in age 2, and then they'll go up into age 3. So, I believe the French are a little bit easier to rush than the Dutch, because they don't have the banks, which means the banks will sometimes act as like a natural wall for the Dutch. So the French don't really have that. So all I can say is try and pressurize them, deny their trading post. Most of the time, French players will pretty much always build a trading post at the start of the game if there is that availability. So just try and get some troops out into age 2, take that TP down, and just defend any sort of raids as best you can in age 2, and hopefully from that you'll be able to come out on top. The Germans. So the Germans, all you're going to expect is Uhlans, which are the cavs. So they get it through their shipments, and you'll see a lot of them. And what they'll tend to do is try and raid you as early as possible. So just try and play defensive, as defensive as you can, and try and win those raids and take those Uhlans down. And the more unsuccessful raids that your opponent has, the better position you are in, and just try and lose as few villagers as possible. And over time and over the longevity of the game, you should be on top. So just try and make sure you do that. Try and get into age 3. It depends what you want to do. If you want to pressurize in age 2, then fine. Just make sure that you've got something at base, defending against those Uhlan raids, and try and pressurize the Germans as much as you can. Or, as I say, go straight up into that age 3. Be as greedy as you can whilst trying to defend as well. So there's a majority of things that you can do. But of course, it depends on what civ you're playing as well. The Ottomans. So sort of 2 ways the Ottomans can go. Most of the time it will be a fast fortress, which is straight up into age 3. They'll normally build a trading post right at the start of the game and build a mosque, which gets them extra XP. That will enable them to get their shipments a lot quicker, and they'll be able to get up into age 3 pretty quickly. The other option that the Ottomans will do is they will put either like a double barracks, a forward base, which is an aggressive base, out into the middle of the map or nearer to your base. They'll either build 2 barracks, or they'll build like an artillery foundry in a barracks, and they'll just try and pressurize you and end the game in age 2. So it's kind of difficult. You do need to rely on a little bit of scouting to see what they're going to be going for, and also what they use to age up with age 2. Sometimes in age 2 they'll age up with the outpost and 200 gold, and sometimes they will do a quartermaster, which is the 400 wood. So you just sort of need to use a little bit of scouting. Can be a little bit tricky, but I would say honestly, just try and sort of predict that they're going to go a rush. Just try and just think that they're just going to, and assume that they're going to go for a rush. That's what I suggest you do. So make sure you've got good defenses. Make sure you've got a barracks or a stables up pretty early. I suggest a barracks, and see if you can hold as best you can. And if you hold and you defend well, then you are definitely ahead of the game. The Portuguese, now another sort of trending civilization, I would say, at the moment. Now with the Portuguese, of course, when they age up, they get a free town centre. So most of the time, ports will go for a sort of quite a greedy build, and they will most likely get up into age 3 as soon as they can. However, sometimes you will see an aggressive town centre in age 2, which will be built near your base, and you may see some sort of musketeer aggression in age 2 as well. So once again, very similar to the Ottomans, there's sort of 2 routes that people will go. I would most likely say that out of those 2 options, the ports will most likely go greedy, especially if there's water. If there's water, a lot of the time ports will go into the water and boom and stuff like that. So all I would suggest is try and pressurize them as much as you can. But I would probably leave it until age 3, because especially if they build their town centres defensively, it is extremely hard to try and pressurize a Portuguese player when they have like 2 town centres, an outpost. It's just too much for an army in age 2 to handle. So I would suggest trying to get up into age 3 as soon as you can and pressurizing them straight from the get-go. So the Russians, and as you all know, the hint or the clue is in the name. Russians love to rush. Now I would say 95% of the time you will see a Russian player rushing, and they will put a forward blockhouse out, a couple of strelets and musketeers with a few Cossacks from their town city shipment, and they will be pressurizing you around the 6-minute mark. So I would honestly suggest that you get some cav and that you get some heavy infantry, and that will probably hold you pretty well. And as long as you can deny their rush and you can take down their forward base, you're in a really, really strong position. And the final European civ is, of course, the Spanish. Now, very, very popular with the recent logistician build, which is super powerful. And, you know, to be honest, I'm going to be honest with you guys, at a beginner sort of level, maybe intermediate as well, when you're playing against the Spanish, they are really tricky to take down because of their sheer economic power with the logistician build. If you don't know what it is, then feel free to check it up on YouTube or anywhere else. Logistician build is really, really strong at the moment. So all I can really suggest is that you just try and, once again, I'm going to say the word, just pressurize them as much as you can, because most likely you will see a timing attack from them. Usually a group of musketeers, maybe some crossbowmen, you will see in age 2, or they will take the route of getting into age 3 and getting some falcons. And to be honest, they are just super tricky at the moment. So I can't give you a huge amount of advice, I'm afraid, on the Spanish right now, because I struggle to take them down. But all I can say is try the rush. Rushing's really, really good around sort of beginner, especially beginner players, and also intermediate as well. Rushing is a very strong sort of tactic, and if you do it well, it can be very effective. So I would suggest something along the lines of that. Definitely denying them of that age 3 is super important, because most of the time you will see a fast fortress, but because of the logistician at the moment, it's kind of, you know, sort of kind of tricky. Sometimes age 3, sometimes age 2 aggression, who the hell knows. So now we are moving on to the war chiefs, of course, which are the Aztec, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lakota. So the first one, of course, is the Aztecs. So Aztecs, kind of a tricky one really, because you don't normally see them in the ladder that much at the moment. They're sort of quite unpopular, but sometimes you will see a warrior priest boom, which can be kind of crazy because you can get max villagers or settlers around the sort of, I think it's a 12, 13, 14 minute mark. It can be really, really powerful. So Aztecs can either sometimes go really greedy with that, but if you're a beginner, I probably would suggest defending against a potential rush. You know, the Aztecs can be pretty good for rushing. They can get their war hut relatively close to you. They can get some spearmen in that have high siege damage, and their coyote runners can be really powerful, raiding you as well. So I would just anticipate a rush from the Aztecs. So make sure you defend yourself well and have some pikes or some heavy infantry, because you're going to need it against the coyote runners. And the next one is the Haudenosaunee, and I'm going to be honest, once again, another civ that I rarely play against, so I'm going to try and see if I can root around in my head right now and think of any sort of advice for you guys for the Haudenosaunee. Most of the time, they will go into Age 3. I rarely see, I mean, I'm probably going to get corrected on this, but I rarely see the Haudenosaunee actually playing in Age 2 at the moment, so unless it's some sort of infantry rush, which is rare. So I would just anticipate them going up into Age 3, and if they are going to be doing that, then once again, it's sort of getting them as early as you can. If your civ is strong playing in Age 2, then by all means take the Age 2, or just try and beat them to Age 3 and take them down as quick as you can. Haudenosaunee are pretty good on water as well, but once again, I'm sort of talking to the beginner and intermediate players, so who knows? They are pretty strong on water, so if you do see that, then once again, you just got to try and deny that as much as you can and really put them under pressure to stop that happening. And finally, the Lakota. So, previously when the game released, super popular civ, not as much now. I don't really play against Lakota that much, to be honest now. And there's sort of two forms that you can have in this. You can have a strange sort of infantry rush in Age 2, or you can have the classic sort of age up into Age 3, most likely a semi-FF, which means, before aging up into the third age, you will have a few cav that will come in and try and raid you, and then there will be an age up after that, and you'll most likely see a full cav composition, which will be the rifle riders and the heavy cav as well. So just bear that in mind, but I haven't really seen them much on the ladder. But if you do see them, just anticipate raiding in Age 2, so make sure that you've got a good defense. When you're in Age 3, make sure that you have a good amount of units that can take down cav, because most of the time they will be going just pure cav. And now we're moving on to the Asian dynasties, so the three Asian civs, and we have the Chinese, Indians and Japanese, and we're first starting with the Chinese. Now, if you don't know me, currently I am maining China, so I can sort of give you some good ideas here. So there's two routes that Chinese players will go down. It will either be the Age 2 Old Han Rush, which comprises of the Chu canoes and the pikes, which is very, very effective, or you will be seeing a fast fortress from them. So they'll be getting up into Age 3 as soon as they can and trying to get that economical advantage and trying to mass as many troops as possible. So what I would suggest is just trying to stop China massing. If you don't pressurize, I'm going to say the word again, if you don't pressurize and contain China, they will mass and they will go beyond you. Trust me, they will really snowball. They're a big snowballing civ. So you've really got to keep them in check and contain them as best you can. And if your civ struggles at that, then all I can suggest is try and get up into the third age as quick as you can and see what you can do. So I hope that was helpful advice. Now moving on to the Indians. Now Indians, most likely you will see an aggro fort that they will place in the middle of the map, more over to your side, and they will sort of try and make a little military forward base there against you, and you'll most likely see them playing in Age 2. So you'll see a classic sort of 12 sepoy rush, and the sepoys are the heavy infantry, so the musketeer unit. And they are really powerful in Age 2, so you've got to be a bit careful. Got to make sure that you counter the heavy infantry successfully, and then you should be pretty good to go. The next thing is you can either try and attack the aggro fort head on, or you can scoot round it and try and go for the base. It's entirely up to you, but most of the time around beginner and intermediate levels, you will see India rushing in Age 2. And of course, the Japanese, super strong civ still, probably in the top 3 and definitely in the top 5 civs at the moment. And all I can suggest is most likely they'll be going for a shrine boom. So all I can say is just keep going around the map, keep sieging down, denying their shrines. That will reduce the amount of resources that they can get in, and it's just going to be able to stop them creating as many troops as they can. So I would suggest just keep being a nuisance, splitting your units up, going over the map, sieging as many shrines as you possibly can, and just trying to deny them of that. Most of the time you will see them with a few troops in Age 2, and then you'll most likely see them aging up straight after that. So it depends on how successful they are, whether they want to stay in Age 2, but most of the time you'll see some units in Age 2 try and just be a little bit aggressive with you, and then they'll most likely just age up off the back of that once they've built all of their shrines. But what I'm hoping that you guys do is deny those shrines. So just keep sieging them, because it costs the Japanese player wood and time to keep building them. And also take down their explorers if you see them as soon as you can, because they are the culprits that will build those shrines. So we are now moving on to the 3 unique civs from the definitive edition. So the first one we have is the Inca. Now Inca, to be honest, at the moment I haven't really seen much from Inca, but a lot of Inca players will most likely in Age 2 go for a spearman with the jungle bowman sort of rush. So they will sort of, not necessarily rush, more like a timing attack that you'll see from the Inca player. And then if it's successful, most likely an age up, or they'll just try and push you and win the game. So jungle bowmen, of course, are really strong, and you've got the spearman combination there as well. So just try and see if you can counter that composition as best you can, and try and deny them of many cancha houses as possible. Their cancha houses will automatically produce food for them, so if you have any opportunity to siege those canchas, make sure that you do. And of course, we're moving on to the Swedes. So this is definitely top 3, maybe even top 2 civs at the moment, and very similar to the Japanese, where the Japanese build shrines around the map. The Swedes will build torps around the map, and all I can suggest to you is to get military out in Age 2 and deny as many torps as you possibly can. You know, the Swedes, you know, rely on the torps so much, and if you can deny those, they won't have a leg to stand on. It's their linchpin. You know, they really need those torps to be able to get Corollians out, to be able to age up quickly. And if you don't deal with those torps, and if you don't scout enough around the map and find them, then you know you are really going to have a real struggle on your hands trying to keep up with their economical power. So make sure that you just deny them of torps, and to be honest, you'll be pretty solid. You'll be pretty solid. And the final one is, of course, the United States, the latest civ to the game. So the United States, to be honest, I don't think you'll ever see them playing in Age 2. You know, they are super strong in Age 3 and beyond, and there are some mean builds out there at the moment. Of course, we've got the Marine build, which relies on building multiple town centers, and then you muster Marines that have a huge amount of siege damage and can be really powerful. So that's one sort of build. But to be honest, if you're playing, like, as I say, once again, sort of like the beginner, intermediate players, then you may see the Marine build, or you may just see a strong, fast fortress from them. So all I can suggest is, once again, trying to pressurize and contain them in Age 2, deny them of getting into Age 3, and you will be in a very strong position. And also watch out for those Gatling guns in Age 3. If you are unsuccessful and you can't win the game in Age 2, watch out for those Gatling guns Age 3, and of course the Marine upgrade as well. So guys, that is the end of the video. You know, I thought I'd just sort of, you know, devote maybe a minute and a half to each civ, just to give you a very, very, very brief look upon what you should really expect the majority of the time from your opponent for each of these civs. So I hope it's useful. I know a lot of people in the comments might be saying, you've missed this, you've missed that. That's not 100% correct, but I'm trying to cater towards the beginner players, majority beginner players, and some intermediate players as well, to try and give them an idea of what to expect from each civilization when you're playing in a 1v1 situation. So I hope you guys found this enjoyable. If there is anything that I missed out, there probably is, because I did rush through this really quickly. I didn't want it to be a really long video. Then please let me know down in the comments below. And of course, if you did enjoy the video, leave a like. And of course, you can catch me streaming on Twitch at Widgie1. Catch you guys later.